Amelia.
Hello.
Hey, for another crazy creative artist. Here we are.
Oh, I'm already crazy. Good. Let's get this party going. All right. Well,
Amelia,
definitely please let me know if at any time anything freezes so that I can
let me do my microscopic
Oh, of course.
Microscopic. Again, for those who missed the very beginning, you can go to lasertalks.com or wherever you register, that you can find the longer bios and link to their web pages. So Amelia is also Associate Professor of AI and the Arts at the University of Florida. She's among, are you going to talk about Wampum Code? Yes, okay, then I will not say it. We just say she has received several awards for her immersive installations, including MacArthur, Sundance, Bloomberg Mayor, I believe that was a major one, Alternative Realities Award, and so on. Podium is yours. I'm sure you can introduce yourself better than me.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, hopefully I'll just spend some time talking about cool ideas. And you'll hopefully get some sense of who I am from that. So thank you so much. Please, again, like I said, let me know if for any reason anything stops working so I don't keep talking over a stilled image. But I'm so excited to be here. You know, today I got this in the mail today, my Leonardo magazine. So I'm so thrilled that it came today on the day of my laser talk. I am an enormous fan of it. So thank you so much. All right, well, we'll go ahead and press play and everything should be good. Again, my name is Amelia Winger-Bearskin. Super excited to be here. I do something called a topic roundup. So you sit back, relax, enjoy the show, because at the end, I'm going to have a slide where you can take a screen cap of all the topics. And if you want to dive in on some research on your own and also how to reach me and hear more from me. So I'll let you know when you see that little icon to do a topic roundup screenshot at the end. I got into coding because I wanted to do things that I couldn't do by myself, and being able to collaborate with machines meant that I could do things that I do poorly faster, and then I could do things that machines do poorly better. The first place I started performing was with my mom, who was a storyteller from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I would play the Iroquois rattle and drum while she told stories. I then became a classically trained opera singer. I started composing and directing and making more and more emerging technology mixed with live performance and opera, and kind of ended up in museums. Nowadays, there's a lot of different media. AR and VR are interactive media to tell stories, co-creating with other types of non-human systems. As an artist or as an activist, I look at the way that the Iroquois Confederacy was built. We said that anything that I'm doing now is the result of 7 generations behind me. Anything I do will have a lasting impact on the 7 generations ahead of me. We use stories as a way of taking values and ethics and putting them into the core of innovation. I started looking at the media landscape we have now. How do I take information and encode it for future generations? A lot of my work is really about creating an ethical framework for software development and design, and articulation of values and ethics within technologies, with the understanding that we need to future-proof these. There's a notion that the technology we've created now has outrun us. No one knows how to regulate it. We accidentally opened this Pandora's box and we can't get it all back inside. But actually, we can choose to use technology to build a more just world, a more equitable world. We can demand that. We can say that we want algorithms that are human-centered, that are for our environment, that are pro-democracy. We can articulate the values we want to see in technology and communicate those to 7 generations in the future. What do we want to achieve with the culture and social network that we're creating? So today I'm going to be talking about a new series that hasn't been released yet. This is an NFT video series where I talk about we live our lives according to a moral code, and the time has come for us to code our morals. So decentralization was and still is the hope of many of us early builders of the first generation of online weirdos. The first children to grow up with the internet and the last generation to remember life before it existed. In those early days, we saw the internet as a real promise that it would make information free, democratize media, and grant new forms of economic self-sufficiency. Many of us believed that we could change the way the world works from behind our glowing screens. And some of us actually did that, and many things have changed, but not exactly in the way we have imagined. The promise was that information would be free, but what we got was that we would be the free information as third parties harvested our data. The promise was democratized media, but what we got was media that threatens democracy. The promise was a new economy, but what we got was the gig economy with more precarity and higher inequality. The promise of the early internet lost nearly all of its idealistic moral gravitas. So now that when we talk about promises in the internet, we're probably just talking about a JavaScript concept, another best practice in a software engineer's development stack. In any other field whose name has the word engineering in it, outcomes like this would not fly. Imagine a civil engineer or a structural engineer who is tasked with building the Brooklyn Bridge. A trucking company asks the engineers, okay, we need to plan our routes across this new bridge. How many trucks, how many loads can safely go across and maintain the safety of this bridge? The structural engineer says, hey, look, technology is neutral. I build the bridge, but I don't tell people how to use it. I mean, if someone wants to break the bridge and all falls down, I mean, it is what it is. It's not my fault. But that would never fly, right? But with software, especially social networks and other digital media ecosystems, we are perfectly okay with tech companies telling us that the systems that they have designed are neutral, even as they break safety, democracy, privacy, fraud, make our children unsafe or are abusive or cause deep harm to our country. There is not a responsibility to know its limits, its load, or what could happen to the lives involved should it break. If we start to believe that it's not our responsibility as the builders of these systems, then we're really building systems of harm. We're building bridges and not caring for those who trusted us enough to drive across them. I created Wampum.Codes to address exactly this issue. Wampum.Codes is an ethical framework for software development based on the principles of co-creation as understood by my people, the Seneca Cayuga Nation of Oklahoma, aka Iroquois, what we call ourselves the Haudenosaunee. Like all members of the Iroquois Confederacy, we made wampum. And a lot of people have a misconception about what wampum is. They think it is a form of currency. I mean, it's not really a currency. We used it as a tool for recording and regulating the different political and economic agreements that govern daily life. It was a decentralized means of recording contracts, something like a pre-Columbian blockchain that encoded not just financial transactions, but also ethical values. The project of Wampum.Codes is to try and imagine how we can weave ethics back into 21st century technologies. The core concepts are to put an extra step in every software iteration and development pipeline cycle. For development of all work done on computers, yes, including AI, and take a few hours a quarter to align our goals and look at our risk mitigation. Oftentimes, we'll find that our developers, our UX designers, our leadership all believe that they have the same values, but we do need to articulate them and build rules and logic into these systems to imagine a better future and really listen to one another around our fears, joy, and possibilities for the things that we want to see in the world. We can embed these values as dependencies in our code the same way we do with the rest of our package.json. CEOs, founders, and employees who work in tech are eager for change, and they want new systems to encode values and ethics into the source code for new decentralized projects and systems. While waiting for experts and policymakers to make these decisions for us, we need to be developing systems of harm mitigation and threat modeling so that our products designed to help the world do not harm it. Sure, we need robust regulation, testing methods, and guidelines, but it is up to us to start developing other tools and protocols side by side with every line of code that we write. This is our field, we know how to do it, and we are the ones who need to step up by implementing decentralized protocols around ethics and software. It's a step in the right direction. We live our lives according to a moral code, and the time has come for us to code our morals. Wampum.Codes. So I talk a lot about a colonial mindset and not colonizing our future. So I like to think of colonial mindset as I see it, I like it, I want it, and I'll take it. And I take what will benefit my own political or material interests, but I'm unconcerned with the effect that it will have on the people that I take it from. What's wrong with colonizing a concept? It's not like a natural resource or a piece of land. Ideas are not a zero-sum game. But we all have colonial mindset, no matter who we are, because the culture has colonial mindset. So taking an idea out of context is like plucking a plant from its soil. You lose everything that made that thought work in the first place. When we want to use powerful new technologies such as artificial intelligence or blockchain, we want as much data as possible to help us imagine positive change in the world. We do not need to throw out thousands of years of data that can help fuel the next giant leaps our communities will make with technology. To proceed forward with a colonial mindset is to colonize our future. Our plans for the future need to include more data from diverse cultures and societies, and not only those ideas that can serve our narrow interests or flatter what we already believe. A future that includes us all must be grounded in a thorough understanding of where we already are and where we have come from. This is an image of what we like to say as for the first draft of the US Constitution. It is our Hiawatha Belt, and this is an example of our wampum. Wampum.Codes started out as a podcast. I wanted to bring like-minded Indigenous thought leaders together in order to talk about what inspires them and how they put their values into practice using technology in positive ways for our communities. Hello, welcome to Wampum.Codes. I'm your host, Amelia Winger-Bearskin. Wampum.Codes is brought to you with generous support from Mozilla Foundation and the MIT Co-Creation Studio. I interview Indigenous and Native artists, activists, technologists, coders, innovators, inventors, and otherwise pretty cool people. And I will let my guest introduce herself.
Skenoswaguego, Ondawayesta Nigaso, Agatsenoni, Nanto Igase. My name is Erica Tremblay, or Ondawayesta is my Cayuga name. And I'm super happy to be here and talk with you today.
So there's not a universal set of guiding principles for Indigenous people. We're very diverse. However, it is my desire to assist in collaboration of the wisdom from this inspiring group of people and hopefully offer up a new framework for designing software ethically. So maybe try it out and see if it unlocks something that you care about. If it does, I hope you will include Indigenous people in all of the meaningful projects that you do, because Indigenous wisdom can help solve some of the most complex issues facing the world today. How do we know? Well, we have thousands of years of data to prove it. Another project that I would like to talk with this wonderful group assembled here today is Sky World, Cloud World. Honor Native Sky is a chat-based protocol via SMS, which can serve as a conversational means of teaching about honoring native land. This project is part of a larger art project that I have called Sky World, Cloud World, where I am examining the sacred nature of our cloud-based communications. Sky World, Cloud World tries to understand the cloud as both a spiritual place and a vehicle for the ephemeral way in which we choose to communicate with our kin over distance and time. This concept of the cloud in web-based applications has interrupted our notion of a sky world, cloud world, which is the grand connective tissue all humans have with one another. We must maintain and honor our sky world, cloud world. The layer of sky which protects our world maintains our atmosphere and which has given us the ability to communicate through invisible signals, through satellites, tubes, and more importantly, through dreams and imagination. I loved hearing about the dreams topic earlier today. This is a live performance installation, Soundworks, and chat interfaces, writing, and an NFT video series to connect climate justice activism with communications and Indigenous technologies. I would like to talk to you a little bit about Honor Native Land. I'm part of this wonderful group at the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, Honor Native Land, and they have this really great list of reasons why you should think about including land acknowledgement in your practices. Why? To offer recognition and respect, to counter the doctrine of discovery with the true story of the people who were already here, to create a broader public awareness of the history that has led to this moment, to begin to repair relationships with Native communities and with the land, to support larger truth-telling and reconciliation efforts, to remind people that colonization is an ongoing process, with native lands still occupied due to deceptive and broken treaties, to take a cue from Indigenous protocol, opening up a space with reverence and respect, to inspire ongoing action and relationship. Acknowledgement by itself is a small gesture. It becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationship and informed action. But this beginning can be an opening to greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, a step toward equitable relationship and reconciliation. We also have a wonderful virtual resource kit, and if you go to usdac.us/nativeland, you can download this kit. We also have workshops, curriculum, and webinars and more. So please check out that link. All of our resources are free and available to you, at your community, and to your students. Another project that I'm working on at the University of Florida, where I am a professor, is the UF Climate Justice Lab and Computing Lab, which I am the founder. We're looking at computationally intensive technologies such as blockchain, and certain AI methodologies have come under fire recently for their environmental impact. The UF Climate Justice Lab and the Digital World Institutes, led by myself, takes a proactive role in advocating for environmental and climate justice in recognition of the facts that Indigenous sovereignty is not racial justice, it is climate justice. 80% of our planet's biodiversity is on land stewarded by Indigenous people, even though we only make up 6% of the global population. Climate justice includes the use of emerging technologies to heal and protect our planet. Our lab prototypes sustainable technologies and simulates new economies for a resilient, decentralized planet. Some of the activities that we do include the Wampum.Codes podcast, a cybersecurity toolkit for young climate activists on social media, blockchain plus land back equals climate justice, a network of research. And if this idea is exciting to you, please reach out to me. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. We look at decentralized and Indigenous low-tech solutions, Indigenous antecedent technologies as a roadmap to sustainable computing, Wampum.Codes value-based dependencies in software and AI development, our Wampum.Codes prize for Indigenous technologies, sustainable technology prototyping events and meetups, and supporting the UF Blockchain Lab at our Algorand Center for Excellence. Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to talk about another dream technology. I'm so glad we have so many dream technologies in today's panel. So I like to think of virtual reality as a dream technology. Why? Well, because you're walking without walking, you're touching things without touching them. And when I first started showing some of my VR work at film festivals and museums, I would see my friends, they would participate in the activation, and then we would go to another film festival and they'd be talking about VR and talking about ideas and emotions and metaphors, and they would start describing a dream that they had. And then they would say, wait, that wasn't a dream. Actually, Amelia, that was your VR project. That's weird that I remember it as if I was in a dream. And I thought to myself, I wonder if we remember VR experiences very similar to the way in which we remember dreams, which of course our first researcher had a lot of information around that. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that first piece that I was mentioning, that dream technology piece called Your Hands Are Feet VR. And I was approached by my friend, a producer, Alicia Rayner, who was starring in a new film with herself and another star, Christina Hendricks, directed by Mariana Polka. And in this film, she plays an artist who creates a VR piece and then shows it to her best friend, Christina Hendricks. And she thought it would be really interesting if, rather than it being just a piece that was made for the film, it was actually a real virtual reality piece. And could I commission and create a work so that they would have something from a real artist and they could show it side by side with the film, at Tribeca Film Festival and other film festivals. And so what I created was Your Hands Are Feet VR, this virtual reality experience. And I have a short little video where you imagine you're in VR as you watch this video.
There is that really crazy sound effect when the giant's leg gets shaved. That's this really strange sponge that I bought. That's the worst sponge ever. It's so bad at scrubbing dishes. And we sat there and we were listening to it and we're like, this is the sound of shaving a giant's leg. This is perfect. I started out kind of my creative career as a writer, and I was really interested in kind of experimental writing that leverage different aspects of new technologies. So I got to this point where I was like, it's really fun to think about technology and how it's impacting us, but I would really rather be working directly with the technologies. I went to a grad program called ITP, and I learned how to code. In my last year of grad school, VR suddenly came onto the scene as like something that was going to be accessible for us to use.
You know, Sarah was the first person I had met as an artist who was just working in VR in a more playful way. We just started brainstorming and thinking of moments when you virtually give someone a piece of your life, like in daily life. If I'm talking to Sarah and I'm trying to explain to her how I felt that morning or what I was thinking about the future, very frequently we prototype those kinds of experiences with sayings or with metaphors. So I can say, like, I walked into that room and my stomach just dropped, or it was so like loud that I felt like my ears were bleeding.
Your Hands or Feet is a VR experience. It's an interactive exploration of new metaphors. The experience starts off where you're in kind of this surreal looking kitchen and you have in front of you a half dozen carton of eggs, and inside of each egg is contained an experience that has some kind of psychologically complex action to it that we hope acts as something that you think back on and you're like, wow, this is such a strange feeling. It kind of reminds me of, for instance, like that time that I felt like my hands were feet.
I don't know. I feel like my mind is a confusing machine.
What we're really doing here is we're creating these metaphors that like maybe don't exist but might apply in a situation as like the perfect way to describe this thing.
In the beginning, I started with a basic treatment, so I created a lot of 3D assets to just sort of mock up this world, sort of the look and feel. And we came up with this idea of having it be like a half dozen experiences from, you know, a half egg carton and how we would move from each space.
Landing on the visuals for any project is an interesting process. You know, you have to make something that feels true to something that you like, but it also has to be something true to what the other person likes.
Sarah said she had this amazing friend, Univ Bavarsky in LA, who was an illustrator. We reached out to Univ and, you know, showed him all of the reference imagery, showed him our very tight color palette of what we were trying to go for. And we were like, can you do the Univ version of Your Hands or Feet universe?
And then from there, we were like, how are we gonna put this thing together? Because translating from 2D into 3D seems easy, but to keep the same visual style is not always so straightforward. It made a lot of sense, like, for us to approach it with a style that's inviting and not like depressing or scary, but just a little bit scary maybe.
It's really helpful to like take those two concepts and then give it to one person that can execute that so that it stays really consistent.
So we were like, let's try this tool, Medium, which is a 3D VR sculpting tool. And so we felt like, oh, this is perfect that we found this way to find like a slice of what we were interested in, a way that we can produce it in a really organic and fun way. And that's kind of how we landed on the visual style that we're at right now.
A lot of our music is going to be generative. So generative music is when you're really designing those whys, therefores, and ifs.
You know, normally you listen to a song and it's got the beginning and the middle of the end and there's like nothing you can do about it. But in an interactive song, there's ways that you can alter parts of it so that way you're sort of participating with the music. Every object that you pick up is like contains an audio track. Depending on which objects you interact with, you're really fleshing out what the soundscape of that environment is.
Me and Sarah are doing all this work to create a really fun playground. We might have kind of serious concepts about the emotional resonance behind each of the interactions, which we have very long and engaged conversations about. Like even the physicality of grabbing that object, to that action has to be connected. So we want each of the interactions to also be analogous to a place and time that you might have had that feeling.
When I look at it from an outside perspective, I'm like, a lot of these things have to do with frustration, but a lot of them also have to do with joy and feeling joy while doing something frustrating.
And so I want to give people a moment where they can interact with that quality of VR where they can say, this is an extension of my brain and my experience within the world. This isn't the real world, this is the computational amalgamation of human understanding in this world, and I want to give people an opportunity to interact with that and interface with that.
When we explain it to people, they just get it and they're excited about it, even though it's like, oh, it's like an experience where your hands are feet, because don't you ever just feel like a weird feeling and you don't know how to describe it and it's like something you've never felt before? Well, isn't VR the perfect way to kind of explore that? And people are like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm like, really? So that's been pretty surprising also.
Some other projects that I've done with VR and AR, as we kind of briefly mentioned in the beginning, I worked with the city of New Rochelle, and if you're not familiar where that is, it's north of the Bronx in New York City. And I won a prize, the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge, for $1 million to prototype this idea around working with city planners and citizens to co-design their city with AR and VR, and how we could have them imagine trade-offs and to include more stakeholders than the initial process that had been established for many years. And that was an incredibly fun project. So I definitely recommend thinking about these tools to engage with very large numbers of our community members to make real impact and change in our built environment. Another project that I did was called the Monsters Installation with my wonderful collaborator, Wendy Red.Star. This is an example of it at the Newark Museum right now. It's currently at the San Antonio Museum in Texas. And the project, I took this research camera from Google and we took it to Wendy's reservation. She's from Crow Nation, River Crow. And we went to her Red Star Ranch on her family's land. And we filmed all of the areas where there was this monster called the Little People. And Wendy has them in her culture. I actually have a monster called the Little People in my in Seneca Cayuga Nation as well, although they're very different. We wanted to kind of explore the history of these. And in Crow language, the Little People actually means the keepers of the land. So we thought about how a monster really is a lot about perspective, right? Because it's a monster is, if you are trying to invade and desecrate and destroy a territory, something that is defending it, you would think of, oh, that's a monster. But if you're the people, if you're the little people who are there, and like many of the elders that we interviewed for this incredible project, they were incredible land protectors and the protectors of values and the protectors of their community. And they were not monsters to us, to the people who they were uplifting and defending, and to the land that they were protecting. And so we ask that our audience become monsters with us and think about defending and keeping our land. And so this, from the outside in this museum, you see that it is like a sweat lodge you might see on any reservation, with a tent with lots of blankets on top of it. But inside, rather than it being sort of like that blanket fort inside, it actually is that 360 projection of the land around us, all those spots where you might find traditionally the Little People have lived. We would go in that space. It was just natural that we'd start telling stories about this project, and it felt to me a lot like when you're a child and you go inside of a blanket fort and read a book with a flashlight, but instead you look up and imagine the stars, and in this space you actually see them. Another project that I worked on with this incredible group called Four Freedoms, their hashtag 2020 Awakening, which was a public art project. And you might have read a little bit about us in the New York Times. We created a billboard project all across in every single state and territory of the United States. And it's still going on today. They just released this incredible series of land back billboards. And the billboard project segment that I was a part of was asking artists to ask a question in their billboard. So I wanted to show you my billboard where I asked a question. And the question that I asked is, what is made bright by the loss of your light? And this is a statement that I wrote for the Guardian newspaper about this project. During the global pandemic, an increasingly contentious political landscape, and the surge of energy from rededicating ourselves to racial justice in America, I've witnessed my incredible peers balance fear, bravery, a commitment to family, and to local and global communities of underrepresented people. I've seen them create art in response and build new systems of support. But among my friends, especially my female identifying friends, and especially those of us who are mothers, many of us are being asked to do the undoable daily. I wanted a message to remind us that the world that through change making, we can't let ourselves become kindling. I don't want us to burn out. All the crises in the world today are asking us to run more and more current through the little filaments in our minds and souls. But when those go out, does that leave the world a brighter place? Of course it doesn't. The social, economic, physical, political, intellectual demands of a movement must bring with it the great care for and value of each human being who is a part of it. And this is an example of some of the billboards that took different shapes. In Times Square, they were kind of put on all of these recycling bins, and in the Chinese theater in Los Angeles, they were put on that IMAX ad screen, and then on the far right, that's at the Anchorage Art Museum in Alaska. And we're continuing the project also into the digital realm, where Four Freedoms is collecting art from different artists from that same project on OpenSea. And I just wanted to shout out a couple of awesome events that are happening this week and next. This Friday is the last NFT talk and meetup that I will be doing at Sundance Film Festival. And you can go to newfrontier.sundance.org in a headset or on the desktop with an Explorer Pass and check that out. Would love to see you there. Also at Los Angeles for Freeze, myself and Nancy Baker Carhill are doing an installation with immersive sound. If you would like to see that in a more person, or also there will be virtual ways to see that as well. With Serpentine Galleries, we have Future Art Ecosystems, Art and the Metaverse FAE2 report, which is a publication that you can download for free. We also have a podcast, the episode 2 on co-creation, and a live stream that you can view that we did on Twitch that has been recorded. Another video that you're welcome to watch that we did at Art Basel Miami with Serpentine, Rafiq Angel, myself, Nancy Baker Carhill, and Hans Ulrich Obrist have a conversation where we really get into a lot of the heart of issues around NFTs and art. So if you're interested, check that out either on Tezos' website or on my website at studioamelia.com. Something that I do weekly, and I would love to invite each of you to continue to join and stay in community with me, is I have this group called no-funding.com. No Funding is a mutual aid network that aims to help creatives radically rethink our relationships to funding, grants, and gatekeepers. And rather than experience the soul-crushing lifestyle of striving, rejection, and constant jockeying for a position, we instead find new ways to support one another. And if you'd like to join, what would you like to make with us? So No Funding is a public group. You can visit no-funding.com to get in on the fun and participate in weekly online conversations where members present on topics near and dear to them. No Funding is primarily BIPOC creative technologists, but it is open to anyone and everyone who has ever needed a day job to make something cool that they believe in. Our motto is no striving, no hustling, no funding is a creative collective. And as I promised from the beginning of my talk, here is the topic roundup. Take a screenshot slide. All of the topics that I talked about, if you'd like to find out more information about them, these are all the great Google search terms or websites that you can grab that. So I'll just give you like a couple seconds to screen grab that. And then the next slide I'm going to show you is going to be my own personal details. So if you'd like to learn more about my own work or join No Funding, I have this last screen so that you can take a screenshot of that. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and say thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, very, very, very good, very comprehensive and well-organized presentation. And I have to say that your website is studioamelia.com, correct? Is also well-organized. So I definitely send the audience, invite the audience to check it out. You can also find easily, now don't remember what you click, but you can find easily the page with the talks. I think you have 16 talks there, something like that. And as you can see, she's a very good presenter. So all those talks are worth your time. My only question is a general question, not specific about your work, but because it sounds like the social aspect of art is important to you. My question is about virtual reality. When you do a virtual reality installation, it seems to go in the opposite direction, right? because the moment I put the headset on, I'm just myself. So how do you reconcile this thing? Indirectly, you answer it when you mention briefly your project, the virtual reality for cities. But anyway, I want you to elaborate on this.
Thank you so much. You know, so many different parts of how we learn and how we connect to our world are ways in which we are prototyping the change we want to see in our future. So I'll give you an example of what I think is one of the most immersive medias that is actually only meant for me and by myself, and that is a book. And I think books have allowed me to make dreams and to understand the future in a totally private way. I don't expect anyone else to read a book line by line in the same speed that I read it. But oftentimes I've seen and understood worlds and possible futures that I could have never encountered on my own. And it's not just the academic text that can imagine new economies or new governances or learning about social histories of other people that have lived lives that are different from myself. But even the worlds of fiction, I'm so inspired by the fiction of Octavia Butler, where she imagines these types of futures in different connections and different ways in which we would have DNA structures or communication structures that really radically changes a possible future that I'm building and helps me take my mind out of the now and the crisis of the now and bring me into a possible future, because I can't really have enough energy in the day to do the work that I need to do to make a change in the world if I am totally overwhelmed with a doomed future. I actually kind of need the fiction that allows me to dream the possible futures. And so I think for me, virtual reality is that maybe that visual book. It's possibly for myself, although, you know, there's of course social VR and there's networked VR, and I do love chatting to people in VR, but I also like those reflective moments where I can connect with myself. And I think that's the core to empathy, is really understanding myself and how I can meet my own needs so that I can begin to truly meet the needs of people who are different from myself. Okay,
excellent. Okay, thank you very much for a great presentation. Again, if anybody wants to know more about Amelia's work, go to her website. It's a very well organized website. Thank you all
Thank
of you.
You so much
for these remote presentations. And everybody is welcome to check lasertalks.com for future programs. I will not read them here. You can just go to the website.